Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here. Welcome to episode 282 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Virtually all hunters and shooters probably agree that the 6.5 Creedmoor is a great target shooting cartridge. Most hunters would probably say it's great for hunting deer-sized game too. A smaller number might even classify it as adequate for bigger game like elk. However, the vast majority of hunters would say that using the 6.5 Creedmoor for hunting a grizzly bear is a foolish stunt. Well, Outdoor Life staff writer Tyler Freel would disagree with that assessment, and he used his 6.5 Creedmoor to kill a really nice grizzly during the spring of 2023. Tyler was kind enough to come on the show with me today to discuss his hunt in detail, why he decided to hunt that bear with the 6.5 Creedmoor, what previous experience he had both hunting grizzly with other methods of take, and what other animals he had previously taken with the 6.5 Creedmoor, and how those situations informed his decision to go ahead with his hunt, what rifle and ammunition he used, what situations he would not recommend using a 6.5 Creedmoor for hunting big bears like grizzly, and some other musings about the 6.5 Creedmoor in general, people's reactions to it, etc. You're going to really like today's show. This is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done for the Big Game Hunting Podcast, so stay tuned. But before we get started, please make sure you are on my email mailing list by signing up at huntingguns101.com. You get my free ebook when you do so, and you'll also start to receive the email updates I send out every weekday. If you like the Big Game Hunting Podcast, you will love those emails, which are both entertaining and informative. I get feedback all the time from people who get my emails telling me how much they enjoy receiving them and how much they enjoy hearing from me every day. So make sure that you are signed up by clicking that link in the show notes or by going to huntingguns101.com and signing up there. Okay, let's get started talking to Tyler about this big grizzly he took with his 6.5 Creedmoor. Well, good morning, Tyler. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I've been very excited to have this interview with you talking about this hunt ever since I heard about your your experience earlier this year killing that grizzly bear up in Alaska with the 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know it's taken a little bit. Summers and falls are pretty busy here in interior Alaska, so it's taking a little bit to get lined up, but it's good to talk to you.
Nope, all totally fine. Let's back up here just for a second. For those who don't know who you are, can you just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, well, I am a staff writer for Outdoor Life, the longtime outdoor magazine hunting publication. We're currently no longer a magazine. Technically, we're all digital, but I've been writing for Outdoor Life for more than about 12 years and have been full-time on staff for the last 2 years. And I also have my own podcast, Tundra Talk Podcast, which is just kind of an Alaskan hunting and outdoor podcast. But yeah, I live in Fairbanks, Alaska, and have for the last 20 some years, and I just thoroughly enjoy everything about it.
All right, well, very good. So living up in Alaska, you get a lot of different hunting opportunities that people like me that live in the lower 48 don't necessarily get to have on a regular basis. So I imagine you do quite a bit of moose hunting, for instance. You went on a sheep hunt earlier this year, and then you've hunted more than one grizzly before, right?
Yep, moose hunting, sheep hunting, bear hunting is pretty much an annual just fact of life kind of hunt. The way a lot of people might just go hunt whitetails every year or elk or whatever is around them. This is the stuff I hunt every year.
All right, well, good deal. Now, before we dive into the story of this particular grizzly hunt, can you just very briefly cover some of your previous grizzly hunting experiences that you'd had, before 2023? Yeah,
well, I started out the first grizzly brown bear I ever killed myself was on a coastal brown bear, and I did a little bit of I did a little bit of assistant guiding or helping out with a guiding outfit on a Fognac Island for a couple of years. Hunting coastal brown bears. And I'd been around interior bears, but I really started focusing on it in 2013. 2013 was the first year in the areas kind of around where I hunt a lot, where they started letting us shoot grizzly bears using bait. You could always shoot black bears, but you couldn't shoot the grizzly bears if they came to your bait site, which is, kind of a whole nother deal. But and there was getting to be enough grizzly bears and enough pressure, people having to deal with them all the time, that they slowly kind of unrolled that, and it ended up being, I think, a good thing for the bears too, and the bears and moose populations in certain areas. But I'm kind of rambling. But I started really focusing on hunting grizzly bears specifically in the spring, more than 10 years ago, and I killed four. I got four of them. I killed four of them with my recurve bow, and then there's certain aspects, like that type of hunt is good for, if you're experimenting. I'm not to say I get bored, but I've shot a few of them with my bow. I like trying different stuff and different equipment, and I killed a nice bear with a stone arrowhead, and then had a project where I decided to dabble in muzzle loading and built one of the kit muzzle loaders, and got a nice grizzly bear with that. And so that kind of brought me to current day. So I think I've killed 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 interior grizzly bears.
All right, so you're far from some guy that just started hunting last year and picked up a 6.5 Creedmoor because you heard it was cool and wanted to hit the woods and shoot a bear with it, huh? Yeah. You could say that, I guess. And I mean, I don't know exactly how many bears because I for every grizzly bear I've killed, there's several black bears. So I've seen a lot of bears get killed and killed quite a few myself. So I'm pretty familiar with how to effectively and efficiently kill them. You live in Fairbanks, and so I imagine that you're hunting in that general area around there for interior grizzly bears as opposed to the coastal brown bears then, right?
Yeah. Not too far out of Fairbanks.
Okay, good deal. So these bears are significantly bigger than black bears, and they have all of the stereotypes associated with them being not only bigger, but potentially more dangerous and whatnot, but you're also hunting them from a blind, or I guess an elevated stand over bait. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that lends itself to what you talked about with your quote-unquote experimenting, right? Because if you're going to be shooting at a bear, it's going to be within a pretty narrow range window. It's not going to be 0 to 500 yards. It's going to be probably pretty close in, and you're either going to get a shot at that range, or maybe a little farther, a little closer, or not take it, right?
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, you talked about using a kit muzzle loader. Was that a traditional muzzle loader with a lead round ball?
Yeah, it sure was. It was a Traditions Kentucky rifle, 50 caliber, and and that barrel's twisted 1 in 66, so it's made for shooting round balls, and it shoots them really well. It will stabilize some of the conicals, and I shot a whitetail buck last year with a conical in that, but the grizzly bear I shot, and I shot a couple black bears with lead round balls too, before I shot the grizzly bear. And a 50 caliber lead round ball sounds like it's huge, but it's actually pretty anemic. Like they're only about 175 grains.
Yeah, that is the thing. When it's a ball, it is a whole lot lighter than you would think. You'd be dealing with a conical, probably 250 to 400 grains in that general caliber, and also it ain't going that fast either out of a black powder muzzle loader either. But in any case,
nope.
That's not what we're here to talk about today. We're talking about this deal with the Grizzly with the 6.5 Creedmoor. And so what was it? Can you just briefly tell the story about what made you decide that, okay, I'm going to do this?
Well, we were. It was in April. We're at our outdoor life gun test which we've been doing at Gunsight Academy down in Arizona every spring, where we get as many new rifles for the year as we can. And we do handguns too, but and we go down there and we shoot the heck out of them and evaluate them. And one night after shooting, we're back at the place we were staying, kind of sitting around measuring targets. Myself, our shooting editor John Snow, and my boss, our editor in chief Alex Robinson, are kind of sitting around the table measuring groups on targets and eating chips and salsa. And he and I start talking about, well, so, bear season's coming up real soon, and kind of deciding what I should do. And I just kind of joking said I should shoot one with the 6.5 Creedmoor. And because a lot of the rifles we're measuring groups, a lot of the rifles we get to test are in 6.5 Creedmoor, because it's just it's a superbly accurate factory cartridge. I mean, you can get into a lot of aspects of that, but just a really accurate, really shootable cartridge. And it even better, it makes a lot of people angry.
Yeah.
So I just kind of jokingly said that. My Alex turns to me and said, "Oh, well, now you have to." And so that's pretty much how. I wish it was a little bit more dramatic than that, but that's pretty much how it was. And I decided I would do that this spring.
So, had you had previous experience hunting with this, hunting for other animals with the 6.5 Creedmoor?
Quite a bit. I've killed quite a few animals and seen quite a few animals killed with the 6.5 Creedmoor. When the cartridge came out, I was still shooting competitive service rifle, and some of the crowd, the guys that I shot with and hung with, the cartridge, I don't know if it wasn't a huge splash, but I heard about it at the time because it was introduced as an across the course competitive cartridge to meet certain specifications. And it was a few years later, it was 2012, the first time I saw a hunting rifle introduced in 6.5 Creedmoor. It was a Ruger Hawkeye, or Ruger M77 Hawkeye. And I got one of them, and I shot I shot some black-tailed deer with it, and then I shot a sheep with it I think it was the same year I got it. Mm-hmm. And so, and because I've been a long time fan of like the 25-06 for sheep, medium-sized game, just a light recoiling, accurate cartridge that's, ballistically sound, has a pretty slippery bullet that I figured it would work really well, and it did. And so, fast forward a few years, I got a Winchester XPR, which is kind of their budget rifle in 6.5 Creedmoor, and since then, I've shot quite a lot of animals with that. But since then, that's kind of the rifle I lend out if a buddy of mine that whether if they primarily bow hunt or need a rifle to take somewhere. So that rifle's killed, I think, 7 Dall sheep. It might be 6. I think 6 or 7 Dall sheep. About a dozen caribou, maybe more. A couple black bears. 1 moose, 4 or 5 deer, and another, and now a grizzly bear.
Okay, man. Yeah. So quite the collection of stuff in there with it. Then.
I've seen plenty of stuff and shot plenty of stuff with 6.5 Creedmoor to fully know what its capabilities are.
So the Boone and Crockett Club, you probably know this, but for the listener that may not, Boone and Crockett Club has an interesting feature with their online record book where you can go in and check and see the different methods of take that people used for different types of entries that are in the record book, and it will even break it down by rifle caliber in there. And the 6.5 Creedmoor, far and away, is very popular for deer, and then sheep is like a close to number 2, as far as stuff in the record books that a lot of people use it on. Then kind of a mishmash of other stuff, but it was very interesting there. So I wasn't surprised to hear you, especially talk about shooting all those sheep with it as well. Is that what you used on your sheep hunt this year? Yep,
it sure is.
All right, well, very good.
And you shoot stuff in the lungs and it falls over dead.
It is interesting how that works, and we can talk about some of the more humorous reactions or annoying reactions that people have to the 6.5 Creedmoor. I like it for what it is. I've hunted with it a lot. I don't know that I personally I live in Texas, but if I were going up to Alaska, I don't know that I would choose that cartridge if I were going to hunt a grizzly bear with. But it's one of these things. You look at the numbers on it, and it compares very favorably to a lot of other rounds out there that a lot of people would say, "Oh yeah, no problem shooting a grizzly bear with this or that." But we'll get to that here in a minute. Let's go ahead and talk. Tell us just a general overview of the story of this bear, and we'll dive into various aspects of it as appropriate.
Yeah, well, this bear. So as a little bit of background, hunting, and you talk about hunting bears on bait or hunting grizzly bears on bait. It can, I don't know. People tend to naturally, I think, form their own images or their own mental description of what that might look like or how easy or challenging it might be, but it's quite different even than hunting black bears on bait. The gist of it, where I hunt, there's lots of grizzly bears, and they're pretty what's the word I'm trying to think of? They
Cautious.
move around a lot. So
okay. All right.
Yeah, well, they're very spooky, but they're also very transient. That's the word. So I will, a bait site throughout the year, I may get 15 different grizzly bears use it, but a grizzly bear, especially a mature boar, a lot of times will come in. If they'll find the bait, and they'll usually come back a second night, sometimes a third night, and then you typically never see them again. They move on. And so you have very limited windows to effectively hunt them. You need to be hunting the night after they find it, is kind of my general rule of thumb that I've seen over the last decade of doing it. Mm-hmm. But it just takes a lot of persistence. You have to be checking your bait frequently, and being careful about scent. And first thing I'll do is check my camera, and if there's a grizzly bear I want to hunt that's been there, I don't go anywhere near the bait or minimize my walking around, and set up and hunt. And I've started using those ozonics, the ozone generators, which sound like about the most gimmicky thing you could possibly imagine. But they absolutely work under good conditions. They absolutely work, and I like using those because it just gives me more opportunity to hunt. It got to the point I'd spooked so many bears over the years that if the wind forecast was the wrong direction, I wouldn't even bother going, because I would just spook them every time. And then if you get one, you have a grizzly bear coming in and he gets your wind, he's almost, at least in my experience, they just disappear. You'll never see them again. They're very, very spooky. So I'll check baits till I have a bear that I want to hunt. And I'm usually sitting down in the evening, 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. And most of the time I plan on sitting all night. A lot of times the grizzly bears might come in a little before midnight, but they do seem to really like the 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning time frame as well. And it's not getting dark at that time of year. It's not getting dark, not getting completely dark. So
you're hunting like May, June time frame, way up north, right?
Yep. End of May into June. And typically it takes me, I start really checking and quote unquote hunting. I'll sit if bears are there, usually the last week of May through the end of June. Usually it takes me 3 or 4 weeks before I can get a shot opportunity of just trying. And most of the time the bear doesn't show back up when you're sitting there. That's just the way it works. But if you're persistent and kind of everything works in your favor, then it works. So early on, I took my son out and helped, and he got his first black bear. And I would go hunt, and I'd had my bow, that I wanted to hunt black bears with in case there were no grizzlies. But several trips I had grizzlies in there, so I sat pretty much all night, several times, and then I show up this trip, and same kind of deal. Looked like in pictures looked like a real big grizzly bear, and he'd come in that morning the previous night at 2:30 a.m. and the night before that at 3:30 a.m. So there's a good enough chance that he would come in a third night in a row that I decided to hunt. So sat there and passed up a really nice black bear that I ended up getting later in the season that I couldn't believe I was not shooting. But that's the deal. I don't want to screw up a chance of getting this grizzly, because they can show up at any time too. So it was an entertaining night, but a long night, and it starts getting cold and starts getting pretty dark, and you start questioning whether it's even worth it every time. It's just an exercise in persistence. Mm-hmm. And you start doubting yourself and wondering, all right, well, how late am I going to sit? Because I've literally sat all night before and climbed down from the stand, started getting my gear off my boat, and spooked bears off that were finally coming in at 5:30 in the morning. And
so, are there no legal shooting hours in Alaska?
No, not for big game. No, basically, if you can see it with natural light, you can shoot it.
Okay, all right. So that's how you're able to sit all night. And so you're doing this potentially for several weeks of sitting out most, if not all, of the night, and then you're working all the next day.
Yeah. I'll end up back home in the morning and get a couple hours of sleep and back at it. And it's definitely a grind. It's exercise in patience for sure. So I've also sat all night. With this kind of a sidebar. One night I just climbed in the stand, and grizzly bears are pretty noisy when they come in. Typically, like I'll usually be able to hear them coming and get ready by they'll break sticks, and I don't know if they, sometimes I think they might do it on purpose to scare other bears away, or they just don't care. They're big, and there's nothing that they're really scared of. So, except for people. But one night I climbed into the stand and immediately heard a limb break back in the woods, and thinking, all right, that's that bear that I have pictures of that's coming. And then nothing for a while. And then a couple hours later, hear another one. And well, that's him. And then I kept hearing this and thinking, well, what the heck is he doing? He's, getting up, and I didn't know if he was getting up and tearing stuff up and laying back down. Well, like 6 o'clock in the morning, it was a tree that fell. I heard the tree fall over. So it was a tree that was just, not only was it just a tree that was popping and making noise, that was not a bear. It was, I'm sure, scared away any bears that would be in the area.
Okay, very interesting.
So it was, middle of the night. This black bear had come in a couple times, and I finally decided at 4:30 I was going to pull the plug. 4 o'clock or 4:30. I think it was 4 o'clock. I decided I was going to pull the plug, balancing, all right, how many hours of sleep am I going to be able to get if I leave at this time? So sitting there, it was about 3 o'clock, which is kind of coming out of the darkest part of the night, and had I thought, in hindsight, I heard this grizzly bear guy, and I'm hunting off a river. I heard this bear go in the river from the other side, but I've heard bears swim across the river before, and I didn't hear him any kind of sputtering or excess splashing. I just heard him go in the river, and I listened, and I never heard him climb out. So I assumed that I was just hearing things. And this is all like maybe just before 3:30 a.m. And I look back in the woods, and that black bear is standing back there again. And I thought, all right, this time, if this black bear comes in, I'm just going to shoot it and be done with it. And pretty much as soon as I thought that black bear turned and ran. And then almost immediately I could hear that grizzly bear coming through the woods back to, if I'm facing the bait, if the bait's at my 12 o'clock, he's probably like 5 o'clock back behind me. and I could hear him coming and getting closer. And I thought, well, great, the wind. I was using the ozonics, but the wind direction, it was just barely drifting. It wasn't even blowing or really even a breeze, just kind of the air settling back down behind me to the river. And I thought this bear is going to keep coming off the river, hit one of the trails, and go into the bait in front of me, and that'll be that. But he kept coming along the riverbank behind me, and then I realized, all right, he's going to cut through my scent or the ozone. I mean, he's going to go right through my wind. And he made it through. He made it kind of through there and didn't smell me somehow. I guess whether it was the ozonics or whatever, he didn't smell me. But then I think, all right, now he's going to cross my trail that I walk in on and smell my tracks. And as soon as he hit that, I have this on. I have my video camera recording. As soon as he hit that, you can hear him huff, blow, because he smelled where I had walked, and then take off running. And at that point, I was like, well, that's over. I'm never seeing that bear again. But he kind of kept loping, and he was at a lope, kind of looping through the woods. And I could tell, I could tell he was circling around, and I'm like, well, dang, this thing might actually, sounds like he's going to actually come in. And I think it was because he smelled my tracks and didn't catch my direct scent, if that makes sense. So I got my rifle ready, and my, whether it's a bow or whatever, my general, I call it my, make up my own rules. My rule of thumb is I try to shoot those bears, the grizzly bears, the very first opportunity I get, because they don't act like black bears. They're antsy. They don't seem to stop moving, or they're not near as relaxed as a black bear can be. They're just kind of constantly moving around. And then if they eventually figure out you're there and run off. So, I just held ready, and as soon as that bear, my first thought was like, wow, that bear's a little bigger than I thought he was. But as soon as he stepped out and cleared, I just shot him right in the lungs, which is where I think you should shoot any bear every time. And he started jumping and spinning, and I had the opportunity to shoot him again. So I shot him again, and then managed to have the opportunity to shoot him a third time as he was kind of jumping and spinning off, and shot him a third time. And he only made it about 7 yards, which, it was pretty impressive. He was totally dead. He probably wouldn't have gone more than 50 yards with the first shot, but it's just good practice on grizzly bears if you get more shots to take them.
Yeah, definitely. And it is interesting how it works too. None of those bullets bounced off the bear, did they?
Nope. Not a one.
Now, as I was hearing you relate the story for the first time, I was a little bit incredulous about using the Creedmoor on a grizzly, but as I was thinking about it, and as you were going through the story, I was thinking, man, like, what kind of ammo did he use? And I was like, well, if I were doing this, I guess maybe a 140 Nosler partition would be what I would use for it, and that's what you ended up using on this hunt, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of another choice. I had to use it was kind of to throw people off the scent of Hornady paying me to promote the 6.5 Creedmoor, which is of course nonsense, for no one taking me literally. But that seems to be a conspiracy theory among people who get annoyed about hearing it to Creedmoor. You don't hear about them paying anyone to promote the newer 7 PRC or 300 PRC. Or 6.5 PRC, but apparently they're paying everybody to promote the Creedmoor.
Well, you must be on a different pay scale than me, because I get a check every time I mention it. Just like so, I try and work it in all the time, like they did in Super Troopers, trying to work a meow into the traffic stop.
Yeah, well, it's like it's like Forrest Gump. Like the government must keep that money. I've never seen a dime of that $1 million.
But you're right. I get hit with that all the time too, and same deal. Like I've never actually gotten a check or anything from it, but it is funny the way people feel about it. But fair enough. The partition's a great darn bullet, and I don't know that I could think of something better to use out of the just in general, but especially in the 6.5 Creedmoor under those conditions that this bear hunt took place under. Because really, the only thing that is quote unquote lacking about that bullet is it doesn't have a very high BC, but that don't matter at a shot that's this close.
Yeah, or inside a couple 100 yards. I mean, it's and and that was kind of after deciding to do it. That was the second part of the discussion. What? Because my favorite bullet in the 6.5 Creedmoor is a Hornady 143 grain ELDX, and frankly, the result would have been pretty much exactly the same with that bullet. I don't know where people get the idea that they explode, but I've shot a lot of stuff with ELDXs in a lot of calibers. I mean, not a lot of calibers, but several calibers, and it's just nonsense. They're a fantastic bullet, even especially at 6.5 Creedmoor velocities, up close, it would have done just fine. If you're, I wouldn't, and I don't recommend shooting bears in the shoulder the first shot anyway, just because there's not usually a lot of stuff behind that shoulder to get. But and again, I'm kind of rambling, but the ELDX would have worked fine, and who knows, maybe because no matter what you pick, there's going to be some people who whine about it. So, but the Partition's a fantastic bullet. Any like the Barnes triple shocks would do totally fine. I've even been starting to work up some hand loads. These Lehigh Defense controlled chaos bullets, which are a machined solid copper bullet. Have a pretty large hollow point cavity, and they're designed, as soon as they start hitting fluid and muscle to I mean, maybe explode's not the right word, but have a dramatic hollow point, almost varmint bullet effect when they go in and they shed petals, but the base is solid and continues penetrating. And just this year, I mean, I'm working on loading some in 6.5. I've got some 130 grain bullets, but my son shot his black bear with those bullets in 350 Legend, and they worked really well. I gave a buddy of mine some ammo that I had loaded for 375 Ruger, and he shot a brown bear with it and was pretty impressed with how well they did. I just shot a moose with the same bullet in out of a 300 H&H, and just really good performing bullets.
I've shot those bullets
about as good as I could ask for, really.
I think I've shot the 115 grain version of that bullet out of my 300 Blackout. I haven't killed anything with it just because I haven't tried, but I mean, it shoots really well. It's an interesting concept. But back to the Grizzly, you shot him behind the shoulder, through the lungs, first shot. He spun around, you shot him again, and then you shot him a third time. Where was that third shot?
The third shot was, he was kind of when I broke the shot, he was quartering away pretty hard. And I can't remember if I shot him on the entrance side in the shoulder or it exited through the shoulder. The third bullet I recovered under the skin on the far side that had gone through one of the shoulders. The first two bullets completely passed through the bear.
And about how far was he when you shot him?
Oh, about 10 yards.
Oh, geez, yeah. I've seen the video on your Instagram page, and I mean, yeah, he's right there, and it happens really fast too. And boom, 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 and he dies within the camera frame too. He didn't go far at all after that.
Yeah, and it and frankly, it was really close, but you're within a couple 100 yards. And I'm not recommending, I'm not saying that would be my first recommendation for someone to go shoot a grizzly bear with, but when you use a good bullet and you take and you carefully select your shots, the result's going to be the same. I know, and it's not really anything special. I know quite a few guys who have cleanly killed grizzly bears with a 6.5.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, the results there were very impressive, and you just looking at the reaction of the bear, I would not have guessed any caliber over the other. Maybe something on the lighter end that you were able to cycle the bolt so quickly, get back on target, and take 3 shots so quickly like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but based on the bear reacted exactly, you wouldn't have been able to, if I would have told people I shot him with a 300 Win Mag, like they would have, it just, understanding how bears react when they're shot with rifles, it's very rare that they just drop. Even if I'd been using my 375, he would not have just dropped on the spot.
Yeah, I can see that. I've never killed a grizzly bear. I've killed 2 black bears, and the one that did drop on the spot was one where he was facing straight away from me, and I was above him, and I shot him down through the shoulder blades, right through the spine, and he dropped like that. But that was because it hit the spine. You hit him anywhere else, even with that same cartridge, like you said, you would have run 50 yards, and that would have been the end of it, probably. Yep,
totally.
Well,
and
so you shot him 3 times, and I'll bet. Did you get to examine his body cavity, see what his lungs look like afterwards?
Yeah, I cut him open. I mean, it was pretty dramatic. I mean, it blew, big holes through his lungs. People get, I don't know if they just shut their brain off when you thinking about it. This is still like a high power center fire rifle cartridge, at reasonable distances. You shoot a bullet that's a good bullet through lungs, like at over 2,000 feet per second, it's going to do some serious damage. And it did. I mean, the thing was, and his hair was all wet from swimming across the river, but as he was jumping and spinning around, I mean, there was blood sprayed everywhere. That thing was a mess. When people talk about the 6.5 Creedmoor not leaving good blood trails, it's a very small data set, but yeah, that bear was a bloody mess for sure.
Yeah, if the bullet doesn't exit, then your blood trail may be a little bit lacking, but I mean, with the right bullet and with the right placement like that, I mean, you shooting him behind the shoulder like that, you're hitting the hide, maybe a rib, the lungs, which is, basically no resistance, and then maybe a rib and a little bit of muscle and hide on the way out. It's not a lot.
No.
And I could even imagine, say, potentially even a smaller bullet getting through there like that. I know Jack O'Connor had talked about a friend of his that killed one with a 22-250 and dropped it on the spot like that. So I mean, it'll work. Not necessarily ideal, but in the 6.5 Creedmoor's got a whole lot more on the 22-250 too.
Yeah, it's and one misconception I think is that grizzly bears are not just like black bears. They're not any harder to kill than black bears. In fact, I think in some ways they're especially if you can get one that's kind of unsuspecting and you choose a good shot, I think they're I would argue even easier to kill, or as easy to kill as black bears, because their lungs are bigger.
Oh, that's a good point.
And they're not hard. They're I would say, I mean, my limited experience with elk, I would say that a grizzly bear isn't any of a harder. They're kind of soft. You're not going to have any more penetration resistance than you would on an elk or a big mule deer or a caribou or something like that. They're not. It's not like they're made of concrete or steel.
About how big was this bear, you think?
His hide squared 8.5 feet, which is, the average of the length laid out flat on the floor, not stretched. The average of the length from nose to tail, and then from across the width of his front claws, paw to paw. And which is it's a little bit bigger bear than I thought he was. And that's a really big grizzly for interior. I don't know how much he weighed, but he was pretty heavy. I had when he died right there, I had the thought that I carry a sled in my boat that I can myself drag out about as big a black bear as you'd ever kill pretty easily. And I have drug out last year. I shot a sow grizzly last year, and I was able to drag her out. But for a second, I thought I'd be able to drag this bear get him back to the boat hole. And I was mistaken. When I threw my sled down next to him, his butt was, off the one end and his head was off the other. So he was, and I have a picture of of my rifle laying on the bear. You can kind of get a perspective for how big that bear is. But I used the sled to move him about 10 feet to take better pictures of him, get him out of this brush patch. But that was all I was going to be able to move him.
Yeah, I'm looking at that picture right now with the rifle. Yeah, and I know that a lot of grizzly bears don't necessarily get put on a scale just by the nature of the way that they're hunted and the areas that they're hunted and all that. And I know people are notorious for just overestimating the weight of a grizzly bear or of any bear, just because once again they look a lot bigger than they actually are sometimes, and very few of them actually get weighed. But it's a good sized animal. Would you say he's 400 plus pounds if you had to guess?
I would say I would put him probably in that around 400 pounds. And you keep in mind it's a spring bear, so he doesn't have they weigh probably weighs 30% less than he would in the fall. The only thing, just as a reference, one of the bigger black bears I've killed was squared just over 7 feet.
Ooh, that's a big black bear.
Not nearly as big an animal. He's the biggest black bear I've weighed, and he was 248 pounds.
Interesting.
And a lot of the big, because I can get my bears out, I just bring them home whole, and it's nice and cool. That's a whole nother thing. I usually get them skun and cut up quick enough where I don't bother pulling the guts. And I like getting a live weight on them or a close to live weight. And usually a big, good interior black bear in the spring, most of them weigh between 220 and 235, 240 pounds. Not as big as most people would say. We didn't weigh him, but we figured he was at least 300.
Yeah, definitely. How are you getting to and from your stand? Are you taking a boat, or are you driving, or what?
Yeah, I'm driving and then taking a boat.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah, that's one of the things about Alaska, too, isn't it? Just the nature of that sort of thing. I figured a boat was involved with you talking about the river like that.
Yeah. It's rivers in a lot of Alaska they're travel ways, and for centuries, really, that's how in a lot of areas that's how people could get around. It's the only they're the only feasible travel ways. The ground up here in a lot of places is not like the lower 48. Every time I go down there or go on a hunting trip somewhere, I'm just amazed at how you can just walk around places. How there's actually just dirt ground that you can just walk on. Yeah,
it's not a soupy mush or with
muskeg and swamp and stuff. And that's kind of the area. And one thing I enjoy, I like hunting bears in that area, because it's bears that you would never ever see otherwise. It's so thick, so swampy. Hunting them with bait is the only opportunity realistically that you have to ever even see a lot of these bears. And you get to, and most of them you just get pictures of. You don't even see most of these grizzly bears in person. But it's pretty cool to be able to see what's actually there. I mean, when you walk up on this bear in particular and start realizing how big he was, the thoughts man, there's this thing is an actual monster that lives in these woods.
Yeah, definitely, man. And who knows how often you've just kind of walked right by one of those and not necessarily known it was there either, huh? How close you've been to them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we've talked about a lot with this bear, and it seemed like it was just almost a textbook example of the capabilities of the 6.5 Creedmoor. You have a real good sized grizzly bear, put a couple real good shots on him. The low recoil of the cartridge enabled you to, or facilitated those rapid shots like that. Maybe you had only gotten 2 off with a 3.38 or a 3.75, or maybe even 1, depending on the shooter. And then he doesn't go hardly any distance at all there, and boom, that was the end of it. But I don't know that anyone would go out and say that, 6.5 Creedmoor is the quote unquote best cartridge for hunting grizzly bear, right? It's certainly capable of doing it, but there's pros and cons associated with doing it too, though, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of, I mean, I almost chose it a little bit out of spite because I think it's funny. I have kind of a messed up sense of humor. And I genuinely like the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a good cartridge, but I almost get fueled in the opposite way. It's, when people are whining about it, especially when it's not, when arguments or when people are just whining, it's not soundly based, objective criticism, because there are the objective things that the 6.5 Creedmoor isn't as good at as some other cartridges. And I have never thought that it was the best for a lot of different things, but it's a genuinely good cartridge. And I knew that, but part of the thing is I knew that I would, and I did get a lot more flack for this than shooting one with a stone arrowhead, or shooting any number of them with a bow or a patched round ball, which is a, completely inferior projectile and velocity. That no one even bats. I just think it's funny that no one bats an eye at that. But if you use the 6.5 Creedmoor, it's the end of the world. But it's the only like really, I don't know. I say the only remarkable thing about the whole thing is that people think it's crazy or remarkable, because it's really not. It's not the biggest cartridge. It's not even what I would probably recommend for people to use, but it's not like there wasn't like a huge challenge or shooting one with my bow is much requires a lot more persistent practice, and there's a lot more variables that can go wrong. Pretty much, I mean, I told as we're sitting around the table kind of discussing this, I said, I already know the end of this story. All I need is the opportunity. I'm going to use a good bullet and shoot this bear in the lungs. It's going to go, you use a cartridge that'll put a bullet all the way through both of a bear's lungs, and he's not long for this world. He's going to die within 100 yards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that is the deal too. And you make a good point about the muzzleloader and the bow aspect of things. If anything, you tell people that oh yeah, I did this, they would think, oh man, that's really cool. What a good thing to do with that. The other interesting thing even within just the cartridge world is if you would have told people, hey, I got this old Mauser and 7mm Mauser or 6.5 Swede that I'm going to take out and shoot a bear with it. People, a lot of people wouldn't know what you're talking about, but a lot of other people would be like, oh, wow, that's really cool. You're taking that old rifle out and everything. And the hate that you get with the Creedmoor, at least in my experience, seems to come from two camps. One, it's the guys that, oh man, it doesn't do anything the 260 Remington or the 6.5 Swede doesn't do, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. If you already have one of those cartridges, no need to make a switch to the 6.5 Creedmoor. And then the other guys and sometimes it's even the same people, like, oh my God, the 6.5 Creedmoor is garbage and all that stuff. Like, well, I mean, which is it, right? You clearly love the 6.5 Swede and it's the best thing ever and all that. Is the Creedmoor either the same or is it garbage? Which is it?
Yeah. And I think, well, people, and I notice this whether it's rifles, cartridges, I review a lot of guns, and I have the opportunity to do a lot more shooting than I ever would have otherwise, and collect a lot. I'm trying to consistently collect more complete data, and I notice this with whether it's rifle accuracy. You say, a Tikka T3X. Well, it may not be the most as accurate as everyone claims they are on average. And people just get up in arms. So like people get very emotionally invested in the equipment that they like to use or the cartridge they like to use, and that's understandable. But sometimes it gets a little ridiculous. And I think a lot of people hate the Creedmoor because, they get sick of hearing about it. Frankly, and a lot of, some of the proponents or some of the places they hear about it, whether it's the guy working behind the counter at the whatever sporting goods store that doesn't really know that much about guns, but tells you how good this new cartridge is. Like that's kind of annoying. But it is, but it's not, I think people just kind of take it too far, or to the point where it's just not an accurate or reasonable argument anymore. It's not perfect, and there's other fantastic cartridges too, but yeah, it does have some things that it's very good at.
Well, some people love to love it, and other people just love to hate it. And the reactions that you get from both sides are very funny. I send out a daily email newsletter to all my subscribers, and I have to fight the urge to not talk about the 6.5 Creedmoor every day, because I get such a good reaction every time I send out one of those articles about the 6.5 Creedmoor. For instance, last summer I was waiting on my suppressor to get out of ATF jail, and I had a rifle in 6.5 Creedmoor already sighted in, ready to go, shot great. And I had a hog reliably hitting a feeder, and I was seeing it on trail camera every day. And I just needed that suppressor to get there, and I was going to put that suppressor on the rifle, adjust my zero, go out there and shoot him. And so I got this thing, I think on Friday. That afternoon, I went out, shot it, and since it was already pretty well zeroed, I just had to adjust it. And I think I took 8 shots to adjust and confirm the zero. The next day, I went out. Next morning, I shot that hog with it. And the email I sent out about that was, I think, something to the effect of like 6.5 Creedmoor, 9 shots and 1 dead hog. And I told the whole story in it and everything, and everyone that actually read the message thought it was really funny. But there was a lot of people like, "Oh my God, he had to shoot this hog 9 times with the Creedmoor because it's a piece of garbage and all that stuff." Like, no, actually, I only needed 1 shot to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And there's like the work we do, like people, there's we don't have 6.5 Creedmoor in a lot of articles because people don't like reading about it. Yeah. They do. And I try to I try to keep it, within context. I don't feel like I pump it unnecessarily, but there's, let's face it, it's currently like by far and above the most popular centerfire hunting cartridge in the country, and in a lot of places in the world. Our shooting editor, John Snow, was hunting Argali sheep in Mongolia, and had to scrounge a loaner rifle from a local, I think it was a local policeman had a loaner rifle. Guess what? It was a 6.5 Creedmoor. in the middle of Mongolia, and it worked. So it's and people don't necessarily like that, but that cartridge is not going anywhere. It's kind of it was one of the first cartridges and John has some great writing on this and in background, based on these modern cartridge design principles, how the headspace is done, the chamber dimensions, and they're just generally more accurate, in a factory rifle, factory ammunition, they're just more efficient, more accurate cartridges than, no one would design the 308 the way it is if they designed it today, or the 30-06, or any of the cartridges that are great rounds that we love. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like all the guns. I get to shoot a lot and see a lot of results. And I don't know. I'm anti-discriminatory. I like shooting them all.
Well, you talked about that you used to be a guide. I know you're not a guide in Alaska anymore, but what would you do if you were guiding a moose or a grizzly bear hunt and you had a client that wanted to use a 6.5 Creedmoor? How does that change the calculus for someone in that situation?
I mean, I don't know that it would change anything for me. I would honestly be more confident in a hunter that shows up with his deer rifle that he can shoot really well than, I've seen a number. And in the bit of assistant guiding I did, I saw quite a few people bring just these Canon, brown bear hunting, especially coastal bears. I would suggest maybe we use something a little bigger for the average client shooting a coastal brown bear. But even if it's just a 30-06, like a 30-06 is a great brown bear gun. But I've seen a lot of guys bring cannons and seen them shoot them on the range and at bears in the field. And a large cartridge generally just is not going to make up for poor marksmanship or, a stressful situation that they're not prepared to deal with. Those big rifles are great. I love my 375. It's one of my favorite rifles, but it's a cannon. Like, it takes, you got to be on top of that gun to shoot it well. Mm-hmm. And when you're out, especially a traveling hunter, you're out of your element. Things are not, even if I go hunt somewhere else, I'm not in my element, and things just don't work as smoothly typically as they would when I'm doing my own thing in my own backyard. So yeah, I mean, that's just my perspective. As a guy shows up like moose hunting, totally fine. I would just keep it at reasonable ranges and make sure they're taking, selecting a good shot angle, and I wouldn't have any problem with it. I'd have a lot more confidence in a client that shows up with his seasoned deer rifle that he's killed a bunch of stuff with, than his brand new 416 or something like that.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
And I've been, there was a guy, one of the pretty well-known booking agent that, had some pretty harsh criticism of my opinion, but, I just don't think that, it's over dramatized, some of the need to bring a giant gun, even if it's just a medium-sized gun, usually they work pretty well. It's hard to go wrong with something like a 30-06 with good bullets that you can shoot well. You're just not going to out caliber a bad shot. And if things go really haywire, your guide's going to have to shoot your animal.
I would much rather shoot something big, grizzly bear, elk, moose, whatever, with a 6.5 Creedmoor using a really good bullet like a Partition or a Barnes than a 7 Rim Mag or a 300 Win Mag with a real crummy bullet.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. A buddy of mine who is still a guide on Kodiak, and has guided a lot of brown bear hunters. When he draws a tag, or people, his wife or kids draw a tag, and they hunt brown bears on Kodiak, he just uses a 308. He's a guy, and he kill. I've used his picture in a couple different stories before. He killed what was one of the few legitimate 11-foot squared Kodiak brown bears I've seen pictures of. And I mean, he just shot it twice in the lungs of the 308, and the thing, it died. Big surprise. But he's one where, it was not the last time I saw him was hanging out with him. I had some, cause he likes the Barnes triple shocks and tip triple shocks. And I had some in 308 that were 168 grain, which I really like 168s in a 308. But he's like, why would you ever use anything this heavy except for brown bears? It's his thought.
Well, would you agree that maybe a downside of using the 6.5 Creedmoor would be that it would potentially, especially for a traveling hunter, take away some different shots, opportunities that you might get based upon the angle of the animal that is presenting and or the range that you're getting it at, compared to something bigger, like a 300 Win Mag, for instance? Yeah,
I think it absolutely could, but it just what it boils down to is you need to, whatever cartridge you choose, you need to operate within like a reasonable parameters for that cartridge, shot angle, distance, and it depends on what you're wanting. A lot of my hunting, like moose, like I hunt moose. I hunt moose because I love hunting moose and I'm a hunter, but the meat is extremely important to me. I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that I have to kill this animal no matter what, and I have to be able to take any shot angle possible to kill this animal because I want it so bad. Everyone's got a point that they have to, some parameters that they're going to hold themselves to, and if I'm taking, generally, big bears, even with a big gun, I'm like, I want to shoot them in the lungs the first shot. You have just, so yes, like larger cartridges offer more forgiveness for sure. But everyone kind of has to decide what they're okay with. For me personally, always or often or ever need a cartridge that I can shoot to 1,000 yards at any angle on that animal and it's going to go through. I just would generally prefer to get closer and not leave some of those other variables to chance. I'm not saying that there's some skilled shooters that really do well. Like one of my stories kind of picking my favorite bear cartridges for different scenarios. Like I have a 338 Lapua that I really like and it's fun to shoot. And, we've shot my family, my in-laws in particular. They have one that I've load the ammo for and have killed, a dozen moose with these 285 grain match bullets, ELD match bullets. And they perform well, but getting, not straying too far off my point, if you're wanting to shoot hunting black bears in an area, for example, where that's, you're shooting cross canyon, you may have 600, 700, 800 yard shots and it's real thick and like you need that bear to not go very far. Yeah, sure. Shoot a huge, shoot a 338 Lapua, that's going to do a good job of a better job than, a lot of other cartridges, at offering you some forgiveness. So that's a very long-winded and roundabout way of saying, yes, larger cartridges will certainly offer you more forgiveness in certain ways, like your shot angles, but that doesn't abscond you from, if that's the right word, from the responsibility of choosing quality shot angles. And sometimes you just have to wait or get closer.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I think you got to balance the desire to kill that animal no matter what, or no matter what slim opportunity you might have, with some basic, ethics, if that makes sense, or if that's an accurate way of putting it.
I would agree. There's a quote unquote reasonable window for all of these variables, and unfortunately, it's not just you pull one lever and it fixes everything. Okay, you go to the 300 Win Mag, or you go to the 375 and it fixes it. You move up in caliber. You're usually dealing with a rifle that has quite a bit more recoil and muzzle blast, and the rifle itself is heavier, and so it's a more pain in the rear to carry and make a follow-up shot, and there's everyone's ability to deal with those things definitely varies, and there's sometimes situations where it's worth doing it, and sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Especially, like you say, you got something that you shoot really well on the smaller end of the spectrum. Yeah, like the saying goes, right? Any guide would rather have you shoot, or really just period, any situation, you'd rather have that smaller bullet in the right spot than a bigger one in the wrong spot, right?
Yep, for sure. And right. I mean, that's not anything new, even old guy Jack O'Connor and a lot of his writings, he was a fan of cartridges that people can shoot well, for a lot of reasons. So that's kind of where I generally fall. I like the big stuff too, but I don't feel it's necessary to take my 375 moose hunting.
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything else that we need to cover about this particular hunt for this bear with the Creedmoor?
I don't. Unless you have any other questions, I don't think so. I think we hit it pretty well. Just I just would hope that people, hope that people look at things kind of objectively. You understand how, like, how some of these animals aren't mythically tough. Choosing good shot, choosing good shot distances and good shot angles on whatever animal you're killing. Invest the time and practice to be able to be proficient and put a bullet where it needs to go, because the vast majority of whether you call them failures or lost animals are just poor shots. You can't out caliber poor shots.
100%. Well, I will put a link in the show notes to where people can read the article that you wrote in Outdoor Life about this hunt, and then watch the video of the hunt on there as well. I'll also put a link to your Instagram handle and the Tundra Talk podcast for people that want to learn more about you, see what else you have going on. Anything else that that you want to plug while you're on the show?
No, I think that's great. That's very generous, and yeah.
All right, well, good deal, Tyler. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to share this really cool story with us about that hunt today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Now, I do my best to try and keep an even keel on the show and present as close to an unbiased view of things as possible. Believe me, that is hard to do sometimes, especially on subjects like this. Now, the 6.5 Creedmoor is one of those topics that brings out some strong reactions, both positive and negative in people. I might actually start referring to that as CDS for Creedmoor Derangement Syndrome from here on out. Now, like Tyler, I think the 6.5 Creedmoor is a great cartridge, but I don't think it's perfect, and I don't think it's ideal for everything. Take it for what it is: a sweet shooting, mild recoiling, often very accurate cartridge that can push a 140 grain bullet at 2,700 feet per second or a 120 grain bullet at nearly 3,000 feet per second. That's right there with what the original 30-06 loadings, as well as modern 270 and 308 factory loads will do. Though the 6.5 Creedmoor is a little lacking in the bullet frontal area category compared to the others, it generally has a slight edge in the recoil, sectional density, and ballistic coefficient departments, and potentially accuracy as well, that makes things almost a wash. I'm not saying they're all the same, because they're not, but the differences are a lot smaller in practical terms than they are often made out to be between the 6.5 Creedmoor versus those other cartridges. And just like those others, the 6.5 Creedmoor is great for many things and will work beautifully when you use a good bullet and put it through the vitals of even a really big animal like a grizzly bear. You can't ask for much better results than what Tyler got with this particular bear. But let's also not get carried away here either. Neither one of us would say the 6.5 Creedmoor is the quote-unquote ideal grizzly bear cartridge. Far from it. It will work, but you are definitely giving up some performance in some areas by using it. Sometimes that's a big deal, sometimes it's not. On one hand, the old adage about a smaller bullet in the right spot being better than a larger bullet in the wrong spot is true. On the other hand, using a lighter cartridge also means that you simply won't be able to reasonably take some shots due to a poor shot angle and or excessive range with that lighter caliber that you might have potentially been able to take with something more powerful. Like I keep saying, sometimes it's a big deal, sometimes it's not. However, moving up to that bigger cartridge that might be able to increase your shooting opportunities by allowing you to punch through a shoulder blade or take a shot at a little bit longer range also means that you're going to have to deal with more recoil, a potentially heavier rifle, and other factors along those lines that can negatively affect your ability to place your shots where they need to go. Like Thomas Sowell says, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. But as Tyler demonstrated with this bear, as long as you are willing to accept the trade-offs associated with using the 6.5 Creedmoor, are using a great bullet with it, and are using it under circumstances where it is set up for success, like he was, then you can have great results on a very wide spectrum of game, from deer all the way up to and including grizzly bear. Now, I have put links in the show notes to where you can see a photo of Tyler's grizzly, where you can see the video he took of him actually shooting the bear on that hunt, and where you can read the article he wrote about that hunt for Outdoor Life. Make sure you check out his show as well, the Tundra Talk podcast, and his Instagram profile. Links to all of those things are in the show notes. Now, additionally, click the link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com and sign up there to get my free ebook on the best hunting cartridges and to join my email list at the same time. And finally, as we wrap up, please do me a big favor and hit that subscribe or follow button in whatever podcast app you are using if you enjoyed this episode. Also, please leave a rating and review for the show as well if you haven't already done that. Doing both of those things helps me reach other hunters like you who enjoy this sort of content. And by subscribing, you will also start to receive my new episodes automatically every Thursday when I release them. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to thebiggamehuntingblog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.